I'm not very familiar at all with the work that Kenny Rogers released in the 1980s, despite liking a lot of what he did in the 1970s. So when I saw this in a charity shop a couple of months ago, his 1982 album Love Will Turn You Around for only £1, I jumped at the chance of getting it. Hello and welcome to Toby Jones Talks Music. Today we're going to be talking about Kenny Rogers and his 1982 album Love Will Turn You Around. This is also, I guess, a bit of an episode once again of appreciating the music that you already have and learning to listen to your music in a way that means that you actually digest what's going on rather than listening to an album one or two times and then putting it away, which is exactly what I did with this album when I first bought it a couple of months ago. I said I'd seen it in a charity shop for £1, bought it, played it on that day once, the record, just to check it played okay. And it played okay, but put it into the side in my to listen to pile, which seems to get bigger and bigger all the time, and didn't touch it for a couple of months. And when I looked at the track listing on the back of this about a week ago when I went to revisit it again, I couldn't remember any of the songs, so that is testament to the fact that only listening to an album once, even twice, maybe even 3 times, isn't enough to really digest things. I've talked about it a lot on this channel, particularly recently, that I've listened to Bruce Springsteen's catalogue last year, and it was listening to that and really focusing on each album, listening to it at least 5 or 6 times, or as many times as I felt appropriate, to really digest the tracks, be able to read the back of the album and say, yep, I know what that track is, I know what that track is. That feels really important to me now, to really digest an album. So that's exactly what I've done with Love Will Turn You Around. I got it back out around about a week ago, and I've listened to it quite a few times, so I thought it would culminate in a nice review. Now, I said I didn't know much of Kenny Rogers' output from the 80s. I've got a couple of his 80s albums, which I've listened to probably once each again, so I think this exercise will possibly persuade me to go and listen to Gideon, his album from 1980, and Eyes That See in the Dark, produced by Barry Gibb from 1983. I've got these 2 albums. Once again, probably listened to them once, and apart from the singles that I know, I don't really know anything else on those albums. And my brain has probably been taught to think particularly from this compilation, because everything from this compilation, apart from one track, is 1980 or earlier. So, by this being the very best of Kenny Rogers, would lead me to think, okay, possibly his best output came before the early 80s. But this is an album that I've enjoyed listening to over the last week, getting acquainted with. There's no brilliant stuff on here, I don't think. There's nothing that's Kenny Rogers' best music, although I'm quite new to this album. So it might be over time that some of these songs do grow in stature for me amongst some of my favourite Kenny Rogers songs, the likes of You Decorated My Life and Coward of the County, etc, etc. But let's look at this album in a little bit more detail. So there's 10 songs on this album, 5 songs on each side. Side 1 has Love Will Turn You Around, which was the theme from the motion picture Six Pack, which Kenny Rogers starred in 1982. A love song, Fighting Fire with Fire, Maybe You Should Know, Somewhere Between Lovers and Friends. And then on side 2 we have Take This Heart, If You Can Lie a Little Bit, I'll Take Care of You, The Fool in Me, and I Want a Son. And this album is produced by Kenny Rogers along with a number of other producers. There's different producers for the different tracks. For example, Kenny Rogers produces the first 4 tracks. The first one produced with David Malloy as well. But there are other producers as well. You've got Brent Maher and Randy Goodrum on the song Somewhere Between Lovers and Friends. Val Garay on I'll Take Care of You. So there's quite a lot of people involved in the making of this album. In terms of the album art, I think it's a good front cover. The back cover is a little bit nondescript, particularly that kind of mysterious picture of Kenny really there on the back. That's replicated on the sleeve as well, with that picture almost just a white, and then you've got the credits on the back. So nice to see, but ultimately not that much, not a lyric sheet or anything like that. That's probably what this album is lacking to an extent. But in terms of the album artwork, it's all okay. So let's get straight into it with the first song, Love Will Turn You Around. This is, and I can't put really a description on it, it's more of a feeling. I can feel that this is a song from a film, just the way it goes. It's just got that kind of vibe. I can't really explain why, but it's got a good sing-along chorus. It's got good vocal harmonies, which is a credit of this album in particular. It's got a catchy riff as well. It's not so much country, western, you can even call it honky-tonk. It's not that at all. It is certainly more pop, but it's a good way to start the album. Then we've got a love song, which is more Kenny-like. Not the fact that it is just called a love song, but in its sound, it is more Kenny-like. I will preface this with saying that his 70s albums, I've listened to a fair few of them, but once again, like this, I've probably listened once or twice, and some of the deep cuts, the album tracks, I can't really say I know all that well. So I'm certainly not a Kenny Rogers expert into saying that all of his albums are Kenny-like, but this is more like the sound of his hits, really, with more of that country sound, that gentle country sound, like the likes of You Decorated My Life. This song sounds to me a little bit like. It's a little bit slower, the lyrics are quite generic, again it's about a love song, but the arrangement, it's nice, it's gentle, and I like it. Track number 3 is Fighting Fire with Fire, the first story song on this album, where it tells the story of two lovers, if you like, or two or three lovers intertwined. Ignore this, more to akin of the likes of Lucille or Ruby Don't Take Your Love to Town. And this moves along at a good, steady pace. I like the vocal harmonies again here. I said that about the first song. That's something that I don't know if I noticed so much on some of Kenny Rogers' other work, but in terms of listening to this holistically as an album, you can really tell, at least I can, that the vocal harmonies are one of the positive things, most positive things anyway, about this album. Kenny has always had a higher voice potential. If you listen to something like Lady, it is a higher vocal range than perhaps some other country music stars, at least obviously male country music stars. And that blends nicely, I think, here with the backing singers on this track. Track number 4, Maybe You Should Know, is very much a country-style sort of torch song. And lyrically, it's a little bit soppy if you look into it a little bit too much, and not as strong as the likes of Lady, for instance. I think it starts well, but I don't know why it irks me, but the whole line of "a good dancer never dances till he has the cue," it feels a little bit clumsy. I'm on board with the song for the first half, but that just makes it feel a little bit clumsy, and then it's the bit about the orchestra goes in and it's only me and you left, and it does feel a little bit clumsy, but it's okay. The 5th track and the last one on the first side is very much far removed from what comes before, and I'll talk about this more as we go on to the second side. This isn't really country at all. This is quite funky almost, but I guess lyrically it's still in line with what's come before, with the title of Somewhere Between Lovers and Friends. It's got quite a cool sound to it. I quite like the sound of this. It's got a short country-style riff midway through. What I will say, it feels quite short, lacking lyrically. I didn't look at the lyrics for this song, but it felt like there was a lot repeating. There weren't much lyrics going on here. There's not much depth to this like the rest of the songs on side 1. I said that I wasn't all on board with Maybe You Should Know, but at least lyrically it's got a story to it, and that's something that all 4 of the songs on the first side before this has, and I don't really think that Somewhere Between Lovers and Friends has got that lyrical depth to it necessarily. The second side starts with Take This Heart, and looking at the liner notes, if you like, with who is on each track, I was took aback a bit here by seeing that Don Henley of the Eagles is on backing vocals for this track. So I tried to look online, because there's not a lot of information about this album, particularly online, apart from chart placings and stuff like that. No context of the recording and that sort of geeky detail that I like to get into. But in terms of Don Henley, this was a bit of an education for me, that Don Henley was almost mentored by Kenny Rogers in his early career. Kenny Rogers helped Don Henley's early band Shiloh get a record deal in 1969. He produced their self-titled 1971 album, and he brought them to Los Angeles, where Don Henley met his future Eagles colleagues. And there was a really nice tribute when, unfortunately, Kenny passed away. I think pretty much 6 years to the day, wasn't it? It was March 2020 when sadly we lost Kenny, and there was a really nice tribute from Don Henley saying that he owed Kenny a lot. So there might be some sort of link as to why Don Henley appears on this as a backing singer, but apart from that I couldn't get any more information pertaining to this song in particular. This grows slowly. It is a bit of a slow grower. It doesn't really pack a punch straight away. This has got a flute solo, and it grows slowly prior to that flute solo. It's got quite a chilled vibe to it, but because it's quite chilled, I'm not sure it particularly goes anywhere. And these couple of songs, track 5 and 6, and maybe the second half of track 4, presents a bit of a lull when compared to the strong start of this album. And that brings us to If You Can Lie a Little Bit, which once again is pretty out there compared to what's come before. It's got rather strange lyrics. The title is a little bit off-putting. It's a bit of a raised eyebrow one, If You Can Lie a little bit. But I think if you look past the lyrics, the title particularly, it's very catchy lyrically, particularly the chorus. There's even a cowbell here that appears. Why not? Let's have a cowbell. What's not to love? And there's a good guitar solo here from Richie Zito on electric guitars here. I'll Take Care of You brings us more back to the typical Kenny Rogers sound. I don't know if it's intentional here, how the album is structured, that you have the sound that, obviously you have the title track first, which is a little bit different, then we have 3 songs that are more embedded in the Kenny Rogers sound, and then a couple of songs which drift out of that a little bit, and then more towards the end of the album we come back to that Kenny Rogers sound, whether that's something that's intentional, or whether it was that these were perhaps recorded in different sessions, and the other songs were recorded in one session with a different sound, and they were kind of interspliced together. There's not much information about that, so one can only kind of deduce or figure that might be the case. But this is more back to the Kenny Rogers sound, and when that sound is done right, it excels. There's a reason why a lot of what's on this album, this greatest hits album, is really, really great music, at least in my opinion. There's a bit of a Carpenter sound here as well. I noticed we've got a harmonica which appears for the first time, I think only time on this album. This song has potential, but I feel it's a little bit short to really hit the mark. I didn't look when I was listening at the lengths of these tracks, albeit to say that I think this is quite a short album. It comes in at just over half an hour, so the song's probably about 3 minutes each in length, some a little bit longer, some a little bit shorter. But I felt a little bit short-changed with this song. I thought, are we going to have another chorus, which kind of is a crescendo for what's been coming? It feels like this ends and I'm left a little bit short-changed. It's certainly got potential and its lyrics and its sound, but I feel a little bit short-changed from this song. The penultimate song, The Fool in Me, once again deviates from that sound, and it's got the first and only appearance of a saxophone on this album. And anybody who has watched the content on this channel before will know that I'm a sucker for a saxophone, so I quite like the sound of the saxophone. I really like the saxophone solo that's going on here. But there's also, I believe, the instrument which I'm referring to here from the liner notes is the Fender Rhodes, which is almost a bit like an electric piano. And I'm not sure I like the sound of that Fender Rhodes on this song. I don't think it really suits Kenny Rogers' sound particularly. It's a decent song lyrically, but again, I'm not quite sure how much I like it. I feel like this album does try to change the sound a little bit, and I think more often than not, it doesn't really hit for me. The final song, I Want a Son, goes back again more to that Kenny Rogers sound, and I think this is nice enough, but again, if you look at the lyrics a little bit too hard, like I did, I feel like it's a bit clumsy lyrically. The song is called I Want a Son, but proceeds to say in the song, I'd love a daughter just as I would love a son. So it is a little bit clumsy. I think that depending on your mood, you could see this as very sincere, a very nice song, or you could see this as a little bit clumsy almost cliche when it comes to country music possibly, but it's certainly an okay way to end the album. I feel like I've enjoyed this song more listening to it previously than maybe have on today's listen, so it might just be a mood thing. We all come to music, I guess, a little bit differently day to day and when we listen to it again and again, so I'm hoping this is one of those songs that grows on me, and I think this might well be one of those albums that does possibly grow on me as time goes on. So it's kind of a summary really of these 10 songs. I think that I appreciate the efforts of this album to try and change up the sound a little bit. I've criticised the work of Neil Diamond, for example, in the past, particularly his 1981 album On the Way to the Sky, because everything sounds the same. And if that sound the same is good, then it's okay. But I wonder whether this album would have the ideas, the songwriting to really carry it for 10 songs that sound similar. There are peaks and troughs in those songs that have the Kenny songs. I've said that I like maybe the first side more than the second side, the likes of I Want a Son and I'll Take Care of You. I feel like if they were, say, the start of side 2 and then towards the end of the album there's not such good stuff once again, this would struggle to carry through as an entire album containing the same themes and arrangements. I will credit this album for trying something a little bit similar. It doesn't hit all the time, but the one song I do quite like is If You Can Lie a Little Bit, which is a bit of a surprise because I could say that's quite clumsy as well. So again, as I've said previously, this might just be what you bring to the album and what you hear on a particular listen possibly. But it'd be no surprise from what I've said in this is that the more traditional Kenny Rogers tracks are the ones I prefer. So my favourites from this album are pretty much the first side. Love Will Turn You Around, A Love Song, Fighting Fire with Fire. Those are probably my favourites on this album. But it's been an enjoyable experience to go and listen to this once again. I've said this when I've done album reviews in the past. I wonder whether this will become part of the regular rotation or whether I'll just put it away now. But for anyone watching this who, for Kenny Rogers or any other artist, has listened to an album maybe once or twice and put it away and hasn't got it out for a number of months, years, whatever, or even has committed the cardinal sin that I have committed so many times of buying something and not even listening to it at all, get that album out that you haven't listened to for so much time, whatever it may be, just something that makes you think, I'd like to listen to that again. Go and listen to it again, whether it's an album that you only like one of the songs on it and you think, maybe I should give this more of a chance, because this could be possibly interpreted as an album that is built all around that song, Love Will Turn You Around, from the motion picture Six Pack. And I think A Love Song was released as a single, didn't do all two as well as Love Will Turn You Around. But you could say, well, this album is very much like new wave albums from the 80s, possibly, where it's built on that one song that's a hit and then the rest of it is pretty rubbish. But I think if you give an album like this a chance, again, listening to it the first time, there wasn't anything that really hit home particularly, but listening to it more and more, I feel like, and I will preach this until the end of time, that this change that I've made to listening to albums more intently over the last months has really, really helped me in terms of discovering music and being able to go back to an album later on and say, well, I know everything from this. So it'll be interesting, going back to the main point that I was making, whether I will listen to this again. And I've said this in previous videos that, well, I've done a review of something and I'll go and listen to the other albums from this decade, and haven't necessarily done that. I am guilty of moving quite quickly between different artists and different sounds. But if I can listen to even one of these and digest them the same way that I have as Love Will Turn You Around, then that will be a happy, creative experience for me. But if you've enjoyed my ramblings about Kenny Rogers' Love Will Turn You Around, leave a like down below and a comment down below as well, and subscribe for regular music musings. It all helps the algorithm to find us. YouTube very much these days is built around interaction, so likes, comments, shares, subscriptions, they all help. We're also available as a podcast form, an audio podcast form on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, as wherever you get your podcasts. Hopefully this should be available. And if you click up there, hopefully there should be another video that you might like to go and watch next. Thank you for watching.